The courtroom was filled with people. Rows of wooden benches stretched from one side to the other, and every seat was taken. Reporters sat near the front, their notebooks ready, pens poised like weapons waiting to strike. Lawyers shuffled papers, their polished shoes clicking against the tiled floor. The air smelled faintly of old wood and nervous sweat. In the middle of it all stood Karoline Leavitt, a woman who looked as if she didn't belong in such a serious place. Karoline wasn't tall or imposing. She had brown hair that fell just past her shoulders, and round glasses perched on her nose. Her clothes were simple, a plain blue blouse and black pants, but they fit her well enough to suggest she cared about how she looked today. Still, there was something about her that made her seem out of place. Maybe it was the way she kept glancing down at the golden retriever sitting beside her. Or maybe it was the quiet determination in her eyes, even though her hands trembled slightly. The dog's name was Max. He was big for his breed, with soft golden fur that gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights. Unlike many service dogs, Max didn't wear any kind of vest or badge identifying him as specially trained. That fact hadn't gone unnoticed. People whispered about it, wondering why he was allowed in the courtroom at all. Was he really necessary? What could a dog possibly contribute to a legal proceeding? At the front of the room, Judge Harold Becker entered through a side door. Everyone stood up quickly, including Karoline. But Max stayed seated, his tail thumping lazily against the floor. Judge Becker gave him a sharp look but said nothing as he took his seat behind the large wooden bench. Once everyone settled back into their chairs, the trial began. William Grayson, the prosecutor, rose to his feet. He was a tall man with slicked-back dark hair and a suit so perfectly tailored it almost seemed too formal for the occasion. His voice boomed as he addressed the court. "Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we are here today because the defendant, Ms. Karoline Leavitt, has been accused of trespassing on restricted government property. Not only did she enter without permission, but she also attempted to access classified information related to national security." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Restricted government property? Classified information? This wasn't some ordinary case of breaking and entering. The stakes felt much higher than anyone had anticipated. Grayson continued, pacing back and forth in front of the jury box. "Ms. Leavitt claims innocence, yet evidence shows otherwise. Surveillance footage places her at the scene. Documents retrieved from her home further implicate her involvement in activities that jeopardize our nation's safety." Karoline listened carefully, her expression unreadable. Beside her, Max tilted his head slightly, as if he understood what was being said. When Grayson finished speaking, he returned to his seat with a satisfied smirk. It was clear he believed he had already won this battle. Then came Laura Mitchell, Karoline's defense attorney. Laura was younger than most lawyers who handled cases like this, but she carried herself with confidence. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a neat ponytail, and her gray suit gave her an air of professionalism. She approached the judge's bench calmly, her heels clicking softly against the floor. "Your Honor," Laura began, "my client is not guilty of these charges. Yes, Ms. Leavitt was present at the location in question, but she was there for reasons entirely misunderstood by the prosecution. Furthermore, any documents found in her possession were obtained legally and do not contain sensitive material." Laura paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. "We will prove that Ms. Leavitt is a victim of circumstance, targeted, unfairly due to circumstances beyond her control." With that, she returned to her seat, nodding reassuringly at Karoline. Throughout the opening statements, Karoline remained silent. Her focus was divided between listening to the arguments and keeping an eye on Max. At one point, when Grayson mentioned the surveillance footage, she leaned down slightly and whispered something into Max's ear. It was subtle, so subtle that most people wouldn't have noticed, but someone did. Ethan Cole sat in the back row of the courtroom, watching everything unfold. Ethan was a man in his mid-30s with short brown hair and a scruffy beard. He wore a leather jacket over a plain white t-shirt, looking more like someone you'd find at a bar than in a courtroom. Yet his presence here wasn't accidental. He had been following Karoline's story for weeks now, intrigued by rumors swirling around her arrest. Something about her case didn't add up, and Ethan wanted answers. When Karoline whispered to Max, Ethan's gaze sharpened. He couldn't hear what she said, but he saw the way Max reacted. The dog's ears twitched and his body tensed ever so slightly. It was as if he understood her completely, not just as a pet responding to commands, but as something more intelligent. Ethan frowned, filing the observation away for later. Back at the center of attention, Judge Becker called for the first witness to take the stand. Richard Hargrove, a wiry man in his 60s with thinning gray hair, walked slowly to the front of the room. As he swore to tell the truth, Karoline studied him closely. There was something familiar about him, though she couldn't quite place where she'd seen him before. Grayson approached Richard with a confident stride. "Mr. Hargrove, can you please explain your role in relation to the facility involved in this case?" Richard cleared his throat nervously. "I worked there as a security contractor several years ago. My job was to ensure unauthorized personnel didn't gain access to certain areas." "And during your time there, did you encounter anything unusual?" Grayson asked, raising an eyebrow dramatically. Richard hesitated, glancing around the room as if searching for help. "Well, yes. There were things, projects, that I wasn't supposed to know about, things I still don't fully understand." This revelation caused a stir among the spectators. Even Judge Becker leaned forward slightly, his interest piqued. Grayson pressed on, asking detailed questions about Richard's experiences. Meanwhile, Karoline gave another small gesture toward Max, a flick of her wrist this time. Again, Max responded immediately, his head tilting as if confirming receipt of a message. What no one realized, not even Laura or Ethan, was that Karoline and Max shared a connection far deeper than anyone could imagine. Max wasn't just a, loyal pet. He was part of a secret experiment involving advanced technology. And today, in this courtroom, Karoline intended to expose the truth, not just about herself, but about the hidden forces manipulating events behind the scenes. As the morning session drew to a close, tensions simmered beneath the surface. Questions lingered unanswered, and suspicions grew stronger with each passing moment. No one suspected that the real drama was yet to come, and that Max would play a pivotal role in unraveling the mystery. For now, however, the courtroom adjourned for lunch, leaving everyone eager to see what would happen next. The lunch break gave everyone time to think, but for Karoline Leavitt, it was more than just a pause. She sat on a bench outside the courthouse, her golden retriever Max lying quietly beside her. People walked past, some glancing curiously at the dog, others whispering about the morning's events. Karoline didn't pay them much attention. Her mind was racing, replaying every word that had been said in the courtroom and planning her next move. Max seemed unusually alert, despite the calm demeanor he projected. His ears twitched occasionally, as if picking up sounds no one else could hear. Karoline reached down and scratched behind his ear, a small gesture meant to reassure him, or perhaps herself. "We've got this," she murmured softly, though she wasn't sure if she believed it herself. Nearby, Ethan Cole leaned against a tree, observing Karoline from a distance. He hadn't approached her yet, but he couldn't shake the feeling that there was something extraordinary about her, and the way the dog responded to her signals made Ethan wonder if Max was more than just a well-trained companion. There was intelligence in his eyes, a sharpness that didn't belong to an ordinary animal. Ethan decided he needed answers, even if it meant confronting Karoline directly. Inside the courthouse cafeteria, Laura Mitchell sat alone at a table, reviewing her notes. She had defended plenty of clients before, but this case felt different. The prosecutor, William Grayson, was relentless, and the evidence against Karoline seemed overwhelming at first glance. But there were gaps, holes in the story that didn't quite add up. Laura tapped her pen against the edge of her notebook, deep in thought. If she could find a way to exploit those gaps, maybe she could turn the tide in Karoline's favor. Back in the courtroom after lunch, the atmosphere was tense. Everyone returned to their seats, and Judge Harold Becker called the session back to order. Richard Hargrove was still on the stand, looking increasingly uncomfortable under Grayson's questioning. The prosecutor circled him like a predator, his voice cutting through the silence. "Mr. Hargrove," Grayson said, leaning on the railing of the witness box, "you mentioned earlier that you encountered unusual projects during your time at the facility. Could you elaborate on what you meant by that?" Richard shifted in his seat, avoiding eye contact with anyone. I can't say too much. It's classified." Grayson raised an eyebrow. "Classified? Yet here you are testifying about it. Surely you can provide some details without violating national security." "I saw things," Richard admitted reluctantly. "Strange equipment? Experiments? Stuff I didn't understand. They told us not to ask questions." This admission caused a stir among the spectators. Whispers spread like wildfire, and even Judge Becker looked intrigued. "Please continue, Mr. Hargrove," he instructed. Before Richard could respond, Karoline gave another subtle signal to Max, a quick flick of her wrist combined with a barely audible click of her tongue. Max stood up immediately, his movements deliberate and controlled. He walked toward the jury box, stopping near Richard's chair. The jurors watched in confusion as Max sniffed the air around Richard, his nose twitching slightly. "What is the meaning of this?" Judge Becker demanded, slamming his gavel. "Ms. Leavitt, control your dog." Karoline remained calm, though her heart pounded in her chest. "Your Honor, please allow me a moment." Before the judge could reply, Max let out a low growl, drawing everyone's attention. Richard stiffened visibly, his face pale. He glanced nervously at Max, then at Karoline, as if trying to figure out what was happening. Laura noticed the interaction and leaned closer to Karoline. "What's going on?" Laura whispered urgently. Karoline didn't answer. Instead, she focused on Max, who now moved toward Richard's briefcase, which lay open on the floor beside him. Without hesitation, Max stuck his nose inside and retrieved a small metallic object, a device resembling a USB drive. He trotted back to Karoline and dropped it at her feet. The courtroom erupted into chaos. Reporters scrambled to take pictures while Grayson shouted objections and demanded explanations. Judge Becker banged his gavel repeatedly, calling for order. "Silence," he bellowed. "What is the meaning of this, Ms. Leavitt?" Karoline picked up the device and held it aloft for everyone to see. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice was steady. "This is proof," she declared. "Proof that the government has been hiding extraterrestrial artifacts and using them for their own purposes." A stunned silence fell over the room. No one dared to speak. Even Grayson, usually so composed, looked shaken. Ethan Cole, who had slipped into the courtroom unnoticed, watched intently from the back row. His suspicions were confirmed. Karoline wasn't just a trespasser. She was part of something bigger, something dangerous. Judge Becker recovered quickly, his expression stern. "Ms. Leavitt, you will explain yourself fully or face contempt charges. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Honor," Karoline replied. She took a deep breath, knowing this was her chance to reveal the truth. "Several months ago, I discovered information suggesting that the facility near Roswell, New Mexico, wasn't just conducting routine research. They were experimenting with alien technology recovered decades ago. When I tried to investigate further, I was labeled a threat and arrested." She paused, letting her words sink in. "This device contains data stolen from the facility. It proves the existence of advanced alien technology and shows how it's being used. And Richard Hargrove," she pointed at him, "was involved in smuggling parts of it out for personal gain." Richard stood up abruptly, his face red with anger. "That's a lie," he protested. "I never—" "You did," Karoline interrupted. "And Max found the evidence right here in your briefcase." Laura stepped forward, addressing the judge. "Your Honor, we request an immediate review of the contents of this device. If Ms. Leavitt's claims are true, this trial must be reconsidered." Grayson objected vehemently, arguing that the device could be fabricated or tampered with. But Judge Becker, sensing the gravity of the situation, ordered a recess to examine the evidence. As court officers escorted Richard away for questioning, the room buzzed with speculation. Reporters rushed outside to file their stories, while lawyers huddled together, strategizing their next moves. Ethan seized the opportunity to approach Karoline. He waited until she was alone in a corner of the hallway before stepping forward. "You're playing a dangerous game," he said quietly. "Do you realize what you've just done?" Karoline met his gaze steadily. "Yes, I do. And I'm ready for whatever comes next." Ethan studied her for a moment, then nodded. "If you need help, I might be able to offer it. But trust isn't free, you'll have to earn mine." Before Karoline could respond, Laura appeared, urging her to return to the courtroom. The recess was ending, and Judge Becker had reconvened the session. As they re-entered the room, Karoline felt a mix of fear and determination. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she also knew she couldn't back down now. The second part of the trial promised to be even more dramatic than the first. Secrets were coming to light, alliances were forming, and the line between truth and lies was blurring. At the center of it all stood Karoline and Max, an unlikely duo whose actions would change everything, for better or worse. The courtroom was quieter than before, but the tension hung heavy in the air like storm clouds waiting to burst. Everyone had returned to their seats after the recess, their eyes glued to the front where Karoline Leavitt stood with Max by her side. The golden retriever sat calmly, his tail swishing slowly against the floor. It was hard to believe that this ordinary-looking dog had just uncovered what could be one of the biggest secrets in human history. Judge Harold Becker cleared his throat and addressed the room. "Ms. Leavitt, you have claimed that the device retrieved by your dog contains evidence of extraterrestrial technology. If this is true, it is imperative that we examine its contents thoroughly. However, I must remind you that any false claims will result in severe consequences." Karoline nodded. Her hand still trembled slightly, but she spoke with clarity. "I understand, Your Honor. I am willing to cooperate fully. This isn't about me. It's about exposing the truth." Laura Mitchell stepped forward, holding up the small metallic USB drive. "Your Honor, we request permission to connect this device to a secure computer for analysis. Given the sensitive nature of the alleged data, we suggest involving an independent expert to verify its authenticity." William Grayson immediately objected. "This is absurd. There's no proof that this so-called alien technology even exists. Allowing such reckless behavior sets a dangerous precedent." Judge Becker frowned but didn't dismiss Laura's suggestion outright. After a brief pause, he said, "Very well. We will allow the examination under strict supervision. Mr. Grayson, do you agree to this?" Grayson hesitated, glancing nervously at Richard Hargrove, who was now seated in a separate area designated for witnesses under scrutiny. Finally, he nodded reluctantly. "Yes, Your Honor, as long as proper protocols are followed." With the judge's approval, arrangements were made quickly. A laptop was brought into the courtroom, connected to a projector screen so everyone could see the process unfold. An IT specialist named Daniel Peterson, an impartial third party recommended by the court, was called in to handle the technical aspects. As he inserted the USB drive into the laptop, all eyes turned toward the screen. At first, nothing happened. Then lines of code began scrolling across the display, too fast for anyone except tech-savvy individuals to comprehend. But soon images appeared, strange diagrams, blueprints, and symbols unlike anything written in human languages. Gasps rippled through the crowd as more files loaded, revealing videos of experiments conducted in secret labs. In one clip, scientists worked on machines that seemed to defy physics, emitting glowing lights and strange hums. Another showed fragments of mysterious metallic objects being analyzed under microscopes. Even Judge Becker leaned forward, his expression unreadable. "What exactly are we looking at?" he asked, his voice low but firm. Karoline took a step, closer to the podium. "These are records of classified experiments conducted using alien artifacts recovered decades ago. The Roswell incident wasn't just a weather balloon crash. It involved real extraterrestrial technology. For years, the government has hidden this from the public, while secretly studying and weaponizing it." The room erupted into murmurs again. Reporters scribbled furiously in their notebooks, capturing every detail. Ethan Cole watched silently from the back row, his arms crossed over his chest. He had suspected something like this, but seeing actual proof left him shaken. Whatever game Karoline was playing, it went far beyond personal vindication. It touched the very foundations of humanity's understanding of itself. Grayson tried to regain control of the situation. Even if these files are genuine, they don't prove Ms. Leavitt's innocence. She trespassed on restricted property and accessed classified material illegally, Laura countered swiftly. Illegal or not, the fact remains that these documents expose corruption and unethical practices within our government. My client may have broken rules, but she did so to uncover the truth, a truth that affects us all. As the debate raged, on. Max suddenly stood up and walked toward Richard Hargrove again. This time he stopped directly in front of the older man, staring intently at him. Richard shifted uncomfortably in his seat, avoiding eye contact with both Max and the rest of the courtroom. His hands fidgeted nervously, betraying his anxiety. Ethan noticed this interaction and decided to act. Quietly, he slipped out of the courtroom and approached Richard in the hallway outside. "You're hiding something," Ethan said bluntly, blocking Richard's path. "And if you don't start talking, things are going to get worse for you." Richard looked startled, then defensive. "Who are you? What do you want?" "I'm someone who knows how these games work," Ethan replied. "You smuggled pieces of alien tech out of that facility, didn't you? Probably planning to sell them on the black market. Am I wrong?" Richard hesitated, sweat forming on his forehead. "Look, I didn't mean for it to go this far. They promised me money, a lot of it. I needed it for my family." Before Richard could say more, 2 court officers appeared, escorting him back, inside for further questioning. Ethan let him go, satisfied that he had confirmed his suspicions. He returned to the courtroom, where the drama continued to unfold. Back inside, Judge Becker called for order once more. "Enough," he shouted, banging his gavel. "We need facts, not accusations. Mr. Hargrove, you will explain your involvement in this matter immediately." Under pressure, Richard cracked. He admitted to smuggling parts of alien technology out of the facility during his time as a security contractor. "I thought I could make some extra cash," he confessed, his voice trembling. "But I swear, I never meant to hurt anyone. I didn't know what they were really doing with it." His confession sent shockwaves through the room. Grayson looked furious, while Laura exchanged a triumphant glance with Karoline. Even Judge Becker seemed taken, aback by the magnitude of the revelations. Then came another unexpected twist. Ethan stood up from his seat and walked to the front of the courtroom. "Your Honor," he said loudly, drawing everyone's attention, "my name is Ethan Cole, and I used to work for the agency overseeing the Roswell facility. I can confirm everything Ms. Leavitt has said, and more." Whispers broke out among the spectators. Ethan ignored them, focusing on the judge. "For years I helped cover up the existence of alien artifacts, but when I saw what they were doing, experimenting without regard for ethics or consequences, I couldn't stay silent anymore. Ms. Leavitt isn't the villain here. She's trying to expose a conspiracy that threatens us all." Karoline stared at Ethan, surprised, but grateful. She hadn't expected reinforcements, especially not from someone like him. Together, they painted a clearer picture of the shadowy network operating behind closed doors, manipulating events for their own gain. As the session drew to a close, Judge Becker announced that the trial would resume the following day. By then, additional experts would analyze the data further, and more witnesses might come forward. For now, the courtroom emptied slowly, leaving Karoline, Max, and Laura alone near the front. "You've done well," Laura said, smiling faintly. "But this fight is far from over." Karoline nodded, exhaustion evident in her eyes. "I know, but at least people are starting to see the truth." Max rested his head on her knee, offering silent comfort. Despite everything, Karoline felt a flicker of hope. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but she wasn't alone anymore. With Max by her side and unlikely allies like Ethan stepping forward, she believed they could change the course of history. for the better. The next morning, the courtroom was even more crowded than before. News of the alien technology and Richard Hargrove's confession had spread like wildfire overnight. Reporters from across the country filled the benches, their cameras flashing, as they jockeyed for the best angles. Spectators whispered excitedly among themselves, speculating about what new revelations might emerge. The atmosphere buzzed with anticipation, but at the center of it all, Karoline Leavitt remained calm, though her hands still betrayed her nerves. Max sat beside her, his golden fur gleaming under the harsh lights. He seemed unfazed by the commotion, his tail swishing lazily against the floor. To most people, he appeared to be just an ordinary dog, but those who had been paying close attention knew better. Max wasn't just a pet. He was part of something extraordinary. His sharp eyes scanned, the room taking in every detail, while his ears twitched at the faintest sounds. If anyone doubted his role in uncovering the truth, they kept their thoughts to themselves now. Judge Harold Becker entered the room, his expression stern. He called the session to order and wasted no time getting down to business. Yesterday, we uncovered significant evidence suggesting the existence of classified extraterrestrial artifacts and experiments conducted without public knowledge. Today, we will delve deeper into these claims. Mr. Cole, you have requested to testify. Please step forward. Ethan stood up and walked confidently to the witness stand. He adjusted his leather jacket before sitting down, his demeanor casual yet focused. As he swore to tell the truth, the entire courtroom leaned forward slightly, eager to hear what he had to say. Mr. Cole, Judge Becker began, you claim to have insider knowledge regarding the activities at the Roswell facility. Explain your background and involvement. Ethan nodded, clearing his throat. I worked for the agency overseeing the Roswell site for nearly a decade. My job was to manage security protocols and ensure that sensitive information stayed contained. Over time, I became aware of experiments involving alien technology. Technology recovered not only from Roswell but also from other undisclosed locations. He paused, letting his words sink in. At first, I believed the work being done was for the greater good. But as I learned more, I realized the truth. The agency wasn't interested in sharing this knowledge with humanity. Instead, they were using it to develop weapons and consolidate power. When I tried to speak out, I was silenced and threatened. Grayson rose to cross-examine him. And how do we know your story is credible? You admit to working for the very organization you're accusing. Why should we trust you? Ethan met his gaze steadily. Because I've brought proof. He pulled a small tablet from his bag and handed it to the court officer, who connected it to the projector screen. Images appeared. Photos of documents, emails, and internal memos detailing the unethical practices Ethan described. Some showed budgets allocated for secret projects, while others revealed plans to suppress whistleblowers. Laura seized the opportunity. Your Honor, this corroborates everything Ms. Leavitt has claimed. It's clear there's a pattern of deception here, one that goes far beyond my client's actions. Grayson sputtered objections, but even he couldn't deny the weight of the evidence. Judge Becker ordered the materials to be reviewed thoroughly, calling in additional experts to verify their authenticity. Meanwhile, tensions continued to rise. Back on the stand, Ethan elaborated further. What many don't realize is that the technology isn't just advanced, it's alive, in a way. It reacts to certain stimuli, almost as if it possesses intelligence. That's why animals like Max are so important. He glanced toward Karoline and her dog. They can sense things humans can't. They're attuned to frequencies we can't even detect. This revelation sparked murmurs throughout the room. People looked at Max differently now, some with awe, others with suspicion. A few reporters scribbled notes furiously, already crafting headlines about the alien detecting dog. Karoline leaned down and whispered softly to Max, giving him another subtle signal. A gentle pat on his head, combined with a quiet hum. Max responded immediately, standing up and walking toward the jury box. There he sniffed the air around each juror, pausing briefly near one woman named Susan Meyer. She flinched slightly when Max approached, visibly uncomfortable. Ms. Leavitt, Grayson shouted, pointing accusingly. Control your dog. This is unacceptable. Before Judge Becker could intervene, Laura spoke up. Your Honor, may I remind everyone that Max has already played a crucial role in uncovering evidence. Perhaps his behavior is worth investigating rather than dismissing. Outright. Susan shifted uneasily in her seat, avoiding eye contact with anyone. Judge Becker noticed her discomfort and addressed her directly. Ms. Meyer, is there something you'd like to share with the court? Susan hesitated, glancing nervously at Grayson before answering. I'm not sure, it's just... I feel strange, like something's watching me. Her admission caused a ripple of unease among the jurors. Max returned to Karoline's side, his posture relaxed but alert. Whatever he had sensed, it seemed, to confirm something she already suspected. As the morning wore on, more witnesses came forward. Former employees of the Roswell facility recounted their experiences, describing bizarre experiments and secretive operations. One man, Daniel Harper, spoke about seeing glowing objects suspended in midair, emitting low-frequency vibrations that made his skin tingle. Another woman, Clara Bennett, recalled being instructed to destroy records related to alien physiology. Each testimony added layers to the growing narrative, painting a picture of systemic corruption and cover-ups. Even Judge Becker seemed overwhelmed by the scope of the revelations. This is unprecedented, he muttered under his breath, though his microphone picked it up, amplifying his words for all to hear. Outside the courthouse, crowds gathered, holding signs that read "Truth about aliens" and "No more secrets." Social media exploded with hashtags like "Barring Alien Justice" and "Barring Free Karoline." People everywhere were talking about the trial, demanding answers from their leaders. For the first time in decades, the idea of extraterrestrial life moved from science fiction to mainstream conversation. Inside, Karoline felt a mix of emotions: relief, fear, and determination. Relief because the truth was finally coming to light. Fear because she knew powerful forces wouldn't let her expose them without a fight. And determination because she refused to back down now. During a brief recess, Ethan approached her again. "You're doing well," he said quietly. "But brace yourself. Things are about to get worse before they get better." "What do you mean?" Karoline asked, frowning. "They'll try to discredit you, maybe even threaten you. Don't let them intimidate you. Keep pushing forward." Karoline nodded, grateful for his support. Max nudged her hand gently, as if reminding her that he was there too. Together they formed an unlikely team, one human and one dog, united by a shared mission. When the session resumed, Grayson launched a desperate counterattack. "Even if these claims are true, and I'm not saying they are, they don't excuse Ms. Leavitt's illegal actions. Trespassing is trespassing regardless of motive," Laura countered smoothly. "Illegal or not, my client acted out of necessity. She sought justice where none existed. Would you rather she stayed silent, allowing this conspiracy to continue unchecked?" The argument raged on, but the tide was turning. Jurors exchanged meaningful glances, clearly swayed by the mounting evidence. Even Judge Becker seemed less inclined to side with Grayson, whose once confident demeanor was crumbling under the weight of the case against him. By the end of the day, it was clear that the trial had reached a tipping point. What started as a routine legal proceeding had evolved into something much larger, a battle for transparency and accountability. Karoline, Max, and their allies weren't just fighting for acquittal. They were fighting for humanity's right to know its place in the universe. As the courtroom emptied, Karoline stayed behind, staring at the empty seats. Tomorrow would bring the final verdict, and whatever happened, the world would never be the same again. Max rested his chin on her knee, offering silent reassurance. Together, they prepared for what lay ahead, ready to face whatever challenges came their way. The final day of the trial arrived, and the courtroom was packed to capacity. People lined up hours before sunrise, hoping to secure a seat. Reporters camped outside, their cameras trained on every person entering or leaving the building. The world watched with bated breath, waiting for the verdict that would either vindicate Karoline Leavitt or condemn her as a criminal. Inside, The air was thick with anticipation, and the tension was almost unbearable. Karoline sat quietly at the defense table, her hands clasped tightly together. Max lay beside her, his golden fur catching the light. Despite the gravity of the situation, he seemed calm, his breathing slow and steady. Karoline glanced down at him occasionally, drawing strength from his presence. She had come so far, risking everything to expose the truth, and now it was time to see if her efforts would pay off. Judge Harold Becker entered the room, his expression unreadable. He took his seat behind the bench and called for order. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "after careful consideration of all evidence presented during this trial, I am prepared to deliver my ruling." The room fell silent, every eye fixed on the judge. Even Grayson, who usually exuded confidence, looked uneasy. Laura Mitchell leaned forward slightly, her pen poised over her notebook, ready to capture the moment. "Ms. Leavitt," Judge Becker continued, "you have been charged with trespassing on restricted government property and accessing classified information without authorization. These are serious offenses, and under normal circumstances, they would warrant severe punishment. However, the unique nature of this case cannot be ignored." He paused, surveying the courtroom. "Over the past several days, we have uncovered undeniable evidence of systemic corruption within certain branches of our government. Classified experiments involving alien technology have been conducted in secret, often disregarding ethical boundaries. While Ms. Leavitt's actions may have violated laws, they were motivated by a desire to expose these practices to the public, a motive that aligns with principles of justice and accountability." A murmur rippled through the crowd, but Judge Becker raised his hand to silence them. "Therefore, I rule that all charges against Ms. Leavitt be dismissed. Furthermore, I call for an independent investigation into the activities at the Roswell facility and other sites involved in similar research. The American people deserve transparency, and it is our duty to ensure that such revelations lead to meaningful reform." The room erupted into cheers. Spectators clapped and whistled while reporters scrambled to document the historic moment. Karoline let out a shaky breath, tears welling up in her eyes. For the first time in months, she felt a sense of relief wash over her. Beside her, Max wagged his tail enthusiastically, sensing her joy. Grayson looked furious, slamming his briefcase shut and storming out of the courtroom without a word. Richard Hargrove, sitting nearby, slumped in his chair, defeated. His role in smuggling alien tech had been exposed, and he knew harsh consequences awaited him. But no one paid him much attention. Now the focus was entirely on Karoline and her victory. As the commotion settled, Ethan Cole approached Karoline. "You did it," he said simply, offering a small smile. "Not many people could have pulled this off." Karoline shook her head. "I didn't do it alone. You helped, Laura helped, and Max." She looked down at her dog, scratching behind, his ear affectionately. "Without him, none of this would have been possible." Ethan nodded thoughtfully. "Still, you're the one who had the courage to stand up when others stayed silent. That takes guts." Outside the courthouse, throngs of supporters gathered, chanting Karoline's name and holding signs praising her bravery. Reporters shoved microphones in her face, firing questions about what came next. Karoline raised her hands to quiet them, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. "This isn't just about me," she said firmly. "It's about holding those in power accountable. We've taken the first step toward uncovering the truth, but there's still much work to be done. Together we can create a future where humanity embraces its place among the stars, not in fear, but in wonder." Her words resonated deeply, earning applause from the crowd. Cameras flashed as Max stood proudly beside her, his tail wagging, nonstop. To the world, he wasn't just a dog anymore. He was a symbol of hope and ingenuity. In the days that followed, the story dominated headlines worldwide. Governments issued statements promising transparency, though skeptics remained wary of empty promises. Lawmakers convened hearings to address the allegations, inviting whistleblowers like Ethan Cole to testify. Former employees of the Roswell facility came forward, sharing their experiences and providing further evidence of unethical practices. Karoline became an advocate for change, traveling across the country to speak about her journey. She partnered with scientists, ethicists, and activists to push for responsible handling of alien technology. Her message was simple. Humanity must approach the unknown with curiosity and respect, not greed and secrecy. Max accompanied her everywhere. His presence, captivating audiences wherever they went. People marveled at his intelligence and wondered how he had been modified to possess such extraordinary abilities. Scientists studied him carefully, hoping to understand the extent of his enhancements. Yet despite their efforts, Max remained enigmatic, a reminder that some mysteries were meant to endure. For Ethan, the trial marked a turning point. Once complicit in secrecy, he dedicated himself to ensuring humanity embraced its place among the stars responsibly. He worked alongside Karoline, using his insider knowledge to guide reforms and protect whistleblowers. Together, they formed an unlikely alliance united by a shared vision of a better future. As for Richard Hargrove, his cooperation proved invaluable. Facing legal consequences for his actions, he agreed to provide detailed accounts of his involvement in the conspiracy. His testimony shed light on key players within the shadowy network, leading to arrests and resignations at the highest levels of government. Months later, Judge Becker reflected on the case in an interview. "This trial changed everything," he admitted. "It forced us to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves and our institutions. But it also showed us what's possible when ordinary people stand up for what's right." Karoline often thought about those words, especially late at night when the weight of her responsibilities threatened to overwhelm her. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she also knew she wasn't alone. With Max by her side and allies like Laura and Ethan supporting her, she believed they could make a difference. One evening, as she sat on her porch watching the sunset, Karoline turned to Max. "We've started something big, haven't we?" she asked softly. Max tilted his head, gazing at her with intelligent eyes. Then, with a soft bark, he nudged her hand, as if to say, "Yes, and we're just getting started." And in that moment, Karoline felt a renewed sense of purpose. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she was ready to face them one step at a time.